أعزائي المشاهدين، السلام عليكم وأهلا ومرحبا بكم في حلقة جديدة من برنامج ضيف وقضية. هناك الكثير من المواد التي تستخدم في البناء والإنشاءات وفي الصناعات الكثيرة ومتعددة، غالبا ما يكون لها تأثيرات سلبية، منها ما يقود إلى أمراض خطيرة من بينها الأمراض السرطانية. ويعتبر الأسبستوس الذي سنتحدث عنه في حلقة هذا الأسبوع من برنامج ضيف وقضية يعتبر أحد هذه المواد التي تؤدي إلى أمراض سرطانية غريبة تصيب نحو 3000 شخص أمريكي كل عام، كما تقول مؤسسات الصحة العامة التي تعنى بشؤون وقضايا الدراسات والإحصاءات، وكما تذكر أيضا تقارير منظمة الصحة العالمية. تقول هذه التقارير إن هذه المادة المستخدمة أيضا لتعزيز قوة الأنابيب ومقاومتها للحريق هي أيضا مادة خطيرة جدا، وتستهدف إذا كان الإنسان قريب منها صحته العامة. ما هي هذه المادة التي كما قلت سنتحدث عنها؟ تسمى الأسبستوس. أين تنتشر وكيف، وما مدى خطورة هذه المادة، وكيف يمكن الوقاية منها؟ In order to carefully answering these questions and many other questions and offer a lot of accurate information about this unknown material to millions of people around the world and here especially in the United States of America, I would like to welcome as well as acknowledge a well-known specialist in the environmental area, Mr. John Wilma. John is the executive director of K-Tech consultant, environmental consultant company. He is well respected person, and the company that he works for is well respected company owned and operated by Mr. Nick Cobrasi. John has more than 20 years of experience in this particular area in environment industry, and more than 10 years of asbestos removal. He is obviously licensed in the state of Michigan. I would like to welcome Mr. John to be our guest speaker for this particular program من ضيف وقضية. مرة أخرى أعزائي المشاهدين، أهلا ومرحبا بكم، وأرحب بالسيد جان. أهلا وسهلا فيك. I would like to welcome you to our show. Thanks for accepting my invitation.
Thank you for having me.
John, can you give us sort of information about, or the exact definition of asbestos? What is exactly asbestos?
Well, asbestos is a mineral. It's mined out of the ground. It's not manufactured. Mm-hmm. There's several different kinds. They all have names, but the two probably most common would be amosite asbestos and chrysotile asbestos. Mm-hmm. In the United States, we stopped mining it, and there's probably 50 countries in the world that have regulated it at this point. Mm-hmm. The United States just being one. Canada still mines it.
Okay.
India still mines it, China still mines it, and there's South Africa, I believe, the country of South Africa still mines asbestos. So it's regulated here. Mm-hmm. It can't come here, supposedly. I mean, we've had drywall show up from China mm-hmm. that has had it, they found that it had it in it. That's not the common rule. Most of the time they're pretty careful. But in the scheme of things, most countries still use asbestos.
Mm-hmm. What is, John, asbestos? What are the materials that asbestos is made of?
It's basically fibers, and if you looked at like a piece of fiberglass insulation, they're big fibers.
Okay.
The asbestos is different than the fiberglass because they're much smaller. They're also much stronger. Mm-hmm.
Can you see it? Is it visible?
You can't see it.
To any regular person, maybe?
I mean, you could see something that has asbestos in it, but the actual asbestos in it, the content of that asbestos, you could never see. We have to use a microscope, and a special microscope, to tell for sure that there's asbestos in it.
So you cannot, as expert, as inspector, as somebody who have been in this business for 25 years, if you see it, you cannot recognize it unless if you put it under the test.
I cannot recognize it for sure. I can recognize that it has the potential to have it, but unless, you know, we want to know for sure which asbestos is in it or if asbestos is in it,
Okay.
we have to actually have a laboratory test it.
What are, John, some of the trades that expose to asbestos?
Well, that's an easy one.
Uh-huh.
Almost any trade that may work on your house
Okay.
potentially could be exposed to asbestos or cause asbestos. In the word we use is have a release, where the asbestos gets in the air, which we can touch on later how you get it in you.
Sure.
But a plumber, a man working on a furnace or a boiler, if you have plaster in your house, someone who's fixing the walls,
Dry walls or
well, drywall or plaster, which is a troweled on type of a, it's
Okay.
pre-drywall. Before drywall, that's how they did in the United States.
Sure.
They'd put lath up and they'd coat like a cementous, it's almost like cement. They put it on to cover the walls with the plaster. The floor tile you walk on could have asbestos in it.
you're talking about the pipes also that are
Well, and
installed.
that gets back to the pipes and the ducts. If they have any kind of insulation on them, that potentially could be asbestos. Now, we all know what fiberglass looks like because you can buy that at the Home
Sure.
Depot.
Sure.
So we also know that if it doesn't look like fiberglass, there's a good chance it could be asbestos.
How does it develop? I mean, is it by, we know people have so much information about lead poisoning, and they know that it developed by years. You know, anything that before 1970, paint before 1972, most likely will have lead poisoning, right? But the asbestos, is it something you will find or you will discover because the pipe is rotten or the wall or the material that you are?
Exactly.
Is it the same thing? So,
And you know, sometimes time degrades asbestos. But when the asbestos was put in the houses, it was put in because it's a pretty good material. You can find in schools there's tile that's 12 inches square.
sure.
And then there's tile that's a little bit smaller. It's 9 inches square. A lot of that 9-inch square tile is asbestos. There's a few pieces of 12 by 12 that could be asbestos.
Sure.
But you think about some of that 9 by 9 tile was installed in the 1920s and it's still good tile. Is it dangerous? No. If it's in good shape. If the floor looks nice and you could put a coat of wax on it, you wouldn't be afraid to bring some people over, that tile is not going to hurt anything.
When, John, this issue of asbestos brought to the attention of the expert, of the attention of the people, and it become really understandable to so many people, and it was immediately regulated. Can you give us sort of historical background about it?
You know, I actually have the act right here, and I
Sure.
don't remember all the names of them, so I
Right.
have to look them up
Right.
because they're all different numbers.
Uh-huh. But it was in the beginning of the 18th century, 19th century.
Oh, well, that's when actually the Romans.
Uh-huh.
In Rome, I thought you meant the act when we made it illegal.
No. Yes,
The Romans used asbestos in the concrete to help bind
really?
it.
And it was well known at that time.
Asbestos was well known.
Uh-huh.
What wasn't well known were the health effects.
Okay.
And asbestos has been used in all kinds of building materials just because of its fireproof, insulating properties, its strength. If some people are familiar with using, say, rebar or armature inside of cement,
Sure.
putting asbestos in cement is almost like little miniature rebars in it. So that's been going on in plaster wall coverings. Now on the pipe insulation, it's a very good insulator and it's fireproof. So they want that when they didn't have fiberglass, that's the type of insulation they used.
Okay. How harmful asbestos is to people? So when you deal with asbestos, I know that you train people, you train experts about, you warn them about certain things, and you train them, you educate them about it. For the ordinary people, how harmful is asbestos?
If the asbestos is in good shape, meaning if there's pipe, it doesn't look like baby powder, for instance, is falling out of it on the floor.
Okay.
Or the tile is still stuck down and it still looks like a nice floor, or there's no holes in plaster. It's of absolute.
So you are saying if it's in new?
If it's in nice shape, it's not dangerous at all.
Okay. So you have to be careful when you are around old building as opposed to new building?
Old buildings that aren't necessarily maintained.
Okay.
Because even if there's an issue like on a pipe insulation where they hit it and made a hole in it, it can be repaired.
Okay.
And then it's safe again.
In a school system, in churches?
In schools, in churches, and in schools, there's a whole set of federal regulations above and beyond OSHA regulations.
So these regulations are no different in its nature than the regulation that govern lead poisoning?
They're similar.
Similar, very much.
But lead, you ingest lead through your mouth, eating it.
You smell,
you actually eat it.
Oh, you eat it?
Or drink it, or like what's happening in Flint right now.
Okay.
Generally, handling lead won't give you lead poisoning.
Sure.
But handling lead and then eating a sandwich without washing it off your hands will. Asbestos is a little different because it's inhaling it.
You inhale it.
Now, there are theories that there's a cancer that you can get from ingesting it, but at this point, they're not proven.
Oh, there is no proof whatsoever.
It's somewhat controversial.
What kind of cancer? Are there any specific kind of cancer? Or?
Well, there's several diseases. Cancer is just one of them, and there's a lung cancer that you can get from breathing asbestos. You can also get in mesothelioma.
Okay.
And there's another one, asbestosis.
This is a disease that
they're lung
affects the
disease.
lungs.
Asbestosis is what we call dose-related, meaning if you breathe asbestos every day for 10 years, asbestosis would be something you could get. The cancer is similar. The mesothelioma, you only have to breathe asbestos once.
Wow.
And you may get it, or you may not get it. If you breathe it twice, your chances of getting it at that point grow.
This is how people are exposed to
Yes.
asbestos? This is exactly
How people are exposed. If they go into a building, and I see a lot of buildings in Detroit, I work on a lot of them, and people go in and they're taking the pipes out to scrap them, and the pipes are covered in asbestos, and they're just pulling the asbestos off the pipes. They're being exposed.
We have in our community, John, so many people who are investors, especially those who are interested very much in buying houses and buying buildings in Detroit. And these houses and these buildings are built in the 1800s, the 1900s, prior to 1930 or 40. What kind of concern you, as an expert in these things, would you bring to the attention of the people who are involved? And they buy this house to fix it and resell it. Are there any cause of concern?
Well, Public Act 92 of 1993 states that in real estate transactions that you have to inform the buyer of any potential health risks.
Okay.
That includes asbestos.
But these...
If you don't know, that's not an excuse.
Sure.
You should know. Because you're buying the property or you own the property.
But these are, so much papers when you sign a deal, transaction. You don't look at the details. You know, everybody knows that there are certain kind of warning, but nonetheless you sign. Do you encourage people to overlook these things
No,
or to
heavens
go
no.
in details?
Heavens no. The only way you can know for sure, and let's separate houses.
Right.
A
From
residential house,
industrial.
let's say you or I bought a house,
Right.
and now we have a commercial building you talked about.
Sure.
The commercial buildings need to have an asbestos inspection. So if you own one and you're going to have work done to it, it would be in your best interest to contact an asbestos inspector. It doesn't have to be me, but you know, of course, K-Tech would like to have your business
Okay.
and have it inspected. It's a very good investment because after it's inspected, you'll know when you have work done to be able to, you know, tell the contractors what they do. Or if you have a plumbing contractor come in and he says he's going to just start cutting pipes, well, you've had an inspection, you know that those are asbestos pipes. No, that's not what you're going to do.
So there won't be any cause for concern when a regular person, John or Smith, buy a regular house.
Well,
It's not like
you still need to be informed.
uh-huh.
And I think that the real concern would be selling the house.
Okay.
Because as a seller, it's your responsibility to inform. So, and as a buyer, you know, what's the old, I don't know, let the buyer beware,
Okay.
caveat emptor in Latin.
Sure.
You know, you got to look around in it. You're going to have a house inspection when you buy it.
So it's exactly like the house inspection, or
It's similar because
easier. House inspection, you know that there is certain electricity issues
Right.
or heat, or you know.
we go in basically and look for the asbestos.
But this is a health hazard.
Asbestos is a health hazard. Houses have been retrofit and remodeled throughout the years. Some houses that you think could have asbestos may not have any because of all the work that's been done on them.
How can you prove that somebody gained cancer through asbestos? Do you have to go through maybe tens of tests, different kind of tests? And
If you're diagnosed with asbestosis or mesothelioma, it's from asbestos.
right away, there is no other cause.
There's nothing that's going to cause those things but asbestos.
What statistic does it? I mean, how popular this type of cancer?
It's
that
not. It's not
that
very
popular. You
common.
said earlier that approximately, I said in my introduction, about 3,000 people are touched by this kind of.
It's relatively
Approximately.
small for the population that we have.
Okay.
And the thing that makes that also a hard question to answer is the latency period, the time from when you get exposed to it to the time you develop
Okay.
a disease is sometimes 25 to 35 years.
Wow.
So sometimes it's hard to backtrack to when that could have actually have been.
Can a person who go to have regular tests show in his blood that he or she has issues related, health issues related to asbestos?
You can get an X-ray,
Okay.
and it's read by what we call a B reader, which is a special X-ray technician that reads the panels. It's not very common. I don't know of anybody who would just go out and get a B reading X-ray.
Sure.
When we get licensed to work with asbestos, we have to get a physical every year, and part of that physical is like for me now that I'm 50 years old, as much as I'm ashamed to admit that I'm 50, they give me a B reader X-ray every year as part of my physical because now I'm getting older. It could be more, they want to catch everything as early as they can.
Sure. You as inspector, who hired you other than the owner of the building, the buyer or the seller? Who hire you? Big companies?
Big companies hire us. The Fords, the GMs, the Chryslers,
Okay.
the cities that are involved in projects where they're demolishing buildings.
Sure.
They hire because these things have to be done. before they knock the buildings down, or if they're going to renovate, to protect the employees, to make sure that the area they're going to go in and start working in isn't have asbestos pipe that they're going to knock down, and then the whole plant will be exposed to it. You know, you don't want to expose one person, let alone 100 people. School systems
Sure.
all have a consultant.
They do this when they have a transaction, or
The school systems, it's just they have one. There's a
they have.
requirement that they keep an asbestos survey, that they constantly look at it several times a year and keep it updated to make sure children don't get exposed.
you and with the team of K-Tech Environmental Consultant Corporation with the CEO and the president, Mr. Nick Cobrisi, you do training.
We do awareness training.
Awareness training, education and awareness. Who are your subject? Who are the people that you target in this training?
The training isn't the biggest part of our business. It's more of an ancillary thing. But employers that have factories or facilities that may contain asbestos, according to OSHA, you have to teach the people kind of what we talked about here. It's a very, it's not in depth and it's not real technical, but they need to know enough so they're not cutting a piece of pipe down that they're not 100% sure has fiberglass on it.
Okay.
And to that same note, I want to throw this in why it's in the front of my mind, when the people that you make these for are watching this, if you think that you have asbestos pipe insulation in your house and you have a plumber come in, make sure you know what he's doing.
Sure.
So he isn't just cutting it out, because there's people out there that will, and there's a lot, most people do the right things, but there are some that will just go the easiest way they can.
You mentioned earlier that there are import material from countries like China, and certain material contain asbestos in it. How careful the authority here in the United States to allow this material to come
They're
to the United
very
States?
careful.
Very careful. Do they have
I know of one
specification
yes,
to follow?
I know of one instance off the top of my head that it happened,
Okay.
and it was pulled when it was discovered and
Okay.
shipped back.
So one type of material?
Yeah, like a drywall panels.
Oh, okay. And they import a lot from
Right.
China.
But they're careful about what comes in, and China doesn't want to send bad stuff here that's
Okay.
bad if they can help it. It doesn't help them. They have to take it back if it's
They will
caught.
ruin their reputation, obviously.
It'll ruin their economy if they send enough. The compounds and spackling that you'd put on the walls, the stuff you buy today doesn't have asbestos in it.
Okay.
The plasters, if you have plaster and you're lucky enough to find a man who understands how to replaster a wall, the old-fashioned type drywall, they don't use asbestos anymore.
But what alternative they use, since asbestos has a material that is against fire, right? Or
Right.
protects the
But
house or the
technology is
building.
caught up today.
Like what? What other than asbestos are used now, currently?
And it's not necessarily that, but when they make plaster, they've engineered these formulas
Okay.
to work
Okay.
where there isn't asbestos in it like there used to be. And you know what? If they couldn't, you'd be better off living with a wood wall than having
Sure.
broken asbestos on your walls.
What does it cost for a regular house or a building, old building, to be cleaned from asbestos? And you are, as an inspector, you have to give a specification to those who clean it, right? What would be the process of a cleaning?
Well, the first and most important thing is whoever is going to do the cleaning needs to be licensed by the state of Michigan.
Okay.
The company and all of the people. With that being said, on top of a license, they have to be able to produce a physical that's less than a year old, and they have to show that they've been to their refresher training. When I was a contractor, I took a 40-hour class at the very beginning of my employment as a contractor. After that, every year, and even to this day, even though I'm not a contractor, I still keep that training up. I go for 8 hours every year and have a refresher.
Okay.
My inspector card, I went to a 3-day class for. And then I take a refresher every year to keep that up.
Who inspect your work? The state?
Potentially the state could inspect my work.
If something developed, if something negative developed, how do you make sure, John, that the place is clear 100% from asbestos?
Well,
or you
I'm
don't?
an inspector, so I don't really clean them. That's not what I do.
No, I mean,
but as an employer of we call them abatement companies, the ones that take the asbestos out, they have a license with the state.
Okay.
So the state, during these projects where they're removing asbestos, the state knows when they're happening because the regulations state that the contractor has to notify OSHA and say, on this day we're going to be at this address and we're going to be removing X amount of pipe insulation from the basement. The inspector was K-Tech or whoever was the inspector, and all these go on this form. On that day, the men show up to remove the asbestos, and OSHA or the EPA may stop by and say, let's see what's going on.
How is the state of Michigan, or at least the Tri-County area, Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb, as far as asbestos is concerned, comparing to other states? Do you have any statistic, any information, any knowledge?
No, as far as how much there is,
right.
No, I don't. I know that the program in Michigan is pretty
similar to maybe other states. And
it's similar to other states. In the states that have a more stringent program, I don't think the programs are any better. They're just more stringent. The controls that the men use to keep the asbestos from getting out of the area when they're removing it are all the same.
Okay. And are there any involvement with the federal
agencies, that's what
government or the state?
It's
only?
with the EPA. Now in Michigan we have what we call the DEQ, and they enforce the EPA rules in the state of Michigan. Some states, they just have the EPA.
So as a profession inspector, do you have to have a certain kind of educational credential, or it's based on experience? How the state test your educational or knowledge credibility?
As an inspector, as we're trained as an inspector and as we're refreshed as an inspector, we are tested at the end of this training. Now, as we discussed earlier, when a project is going to happen where asbestos is going to be removed, the state is informed so they can come by and look. Whenever one of these classes is held, the training agency, and they're private, but they have to notify the state that on this day we're going to be having a class for asbestos inspector or contract supervisor, management planner. And the state has, and they do show up to come and see, and they take names of who's there to make sure that somebody isn't getting a certificate that's not there. And the tests have to be kept on file, and the state may inspect the tests. They may look back and see all my tests and see how I did.
I know that that Nick Coprosy, the owner and operator of K Industrial Consultant Environmental Company, is an engineer, right? Environmental engineer. So in order to be involved in this business, you have to study engineering necessary, or you don't?
Well, environmental engineering is a little bit different than engineering is like building a bridge engineering.
Right.
The industrial hygiene area, and I think environmental engineer, and as long as I've known Nick, I couldn't tell you
he has been an engineer for a long period of time.
Which discipline he studied.
Yes.
I was a law discipline when I studied. And
But
I consider myself an environmental engineer.
Right. but you decided to go different path. Like so many engineers have chose to be lead experts as opposed to asbestos. That is how it works. But you have to have the basic
And a lot of it's
educational information.
a
in
lot of
order
it's
to do it.
experience.
A lot of it experience.
You know, there's no trainer like experience.
Does it pay good? I mean, I want you to talk directly to potential engineers in our community and encourage them or discourage them from becoming environmental engineer or expert in
So I can-
asbestos or lead poisoning.
It pays okay. It pays better the better you are at it.
Okay.
A lot of this work is very risky.
Risky as far as health is concerned, or
Well, health, injury. I mean, you know, the places that are inspected are not generally the best places.
okay,
You wouldn't send your wife and daughters to go look at most of these places.
sure.
Now, some of them are kind of nice, but like if you go to a plant, it's pretty safe. But you know, a lot of the work is very isolated.
Deserted building, for example.
Deserted buildings in necessarily not the best parts of town. So you have to factor in that if you're willing to deal with that, if you can deal with that. You have the safety hazard of the buildings falling in. You have the potential to be exposed to asbestos. You have to look where you're walking.
Sure.
But like I said, the more experienced you are, the better you are.
You said earlier that maybe the information that provided by the state or federal government or educational institution, the statistic is a little bit exaggerated because most likely it does not cause cancer. Most likely.
No,
Or it little bit.
It can cause cancer.
It can cause, but it takes long years
It takes-
in order to develop lungs cancer or anything like that.
But
Why
cigarettes
is
cause lung
why is the
cancer and-
concern? If that is your belief as inspector, why do I have to be concerned about it? Does it cause another health issue, health harm?
Well, they claim that, and there's another controversial, that handling it could give you bumps on your hand and irritation, but that hasn't been found to cause cancer. The health issue is that the fibers are invisible. You can't smell them. You can't tell they're in the air. If there's a dust cloud, if a pipe falls and there's a dust cloud,
Sure.
there's going to be asbestos in that, but you couldn't isolate which are the asbestos just by looking at it. They're microscopic. The health issue is you have children.
Okay. Fragile.
It takes 35 years.
develop.
Is asbestos, to a man who's never been exposed to asbestos, who's 80 years old,
Okay.
is it dangerous to him? If he's going to live to 105, if he's going to live to 110, it will be. How about a 7-year-old? You know, the one thing you don't want is to, you know, even if
After
you're not
30
around,
years, you will
is
have-
to be the guy that caused the fellow at 40 years old to find out that he has 6 months to live.
Do you, John, go and Nick, for that matter, to educational institution like schools, elementary
Absolutely.
and secondary school, in order to make them, the student and the staff, aware of the dangers of this?
Nick's particularly works a lot with school systems, and he has a few clients that are schools that, when an asbestos project happens at a school,
Okay.
Nick monitors the air in real time, and then it's read in real time to make sure that while that project happened, no asbestos escaped out into the school.
Sure.
And that's regulated federally. That has to happen in every school. If you have a school and you see them working on pipes and you see them removing floor tiles, and you don't see you know anybody around or anybody wearing this, there's a problem.
Sure. And from your rich experience in this area, you have been over 25 years experience. Do you see a substitute for asbestos in the near future completely asbestos will be eliminated?
Well, it's already been eliminated.
It's already been eliminated.
There's lingering products out there. To say that there's no products that don't have it, there may be some floor tiles out there.
Okay.
But it's a minuscule amount, but they still have it in them. That is so not the rule, though. It is a big exception.
Mm-hmm.
If you went to your average building supply center, I doubt if you could find asbestos.
Really?
It would be hard. Pipe insulation has come a long way. The fiberglass, the Armaflex, the foam.
Sure.
You know,
Is the regular plumber be able to identify?
usually the guys that have some experience, they know. And the plumbers can work on a little bit of it themselves, as long as it's only
Clean it or?
for what they do. But my recommendation is that you have an asbestos professional do it.
Mm-hmm. So if somebody with sharp eye who can identify asbestos, or for that matter
Potential asbestos.
He or she should do what? Bring it to the attention of the government?
No.
To the authority? To
No,
who?
the government's
To the owner of the house? For
well,
example?
to the owner of the house, if it's not their house, they need to bring it to the attention of them.
Okay.
I am sure, and I really can't speak to the fact of where they would go from there, but there are agencies out there. I'm sure that my OSHA or the DEQ would be interested if there's a house that has disturbed asbestos or potential asbestos containing material in it.
Sure.
No one wants anyone to get sick.
Yes.
If it's your house, you can call an asbestos inspector, and they can do. If it's not your house,
You don't.
it's the owner that needs to do that.
Mm-hmm. So it's against the law to, or
Right, and for instance, people with apartments will call and say, "I have this
Okay.
asbestos tile. I want it removed."
Mhm.
Can't go into. It'd be like one person, and you own the house, so I'm going to go into your house over here and work on it without you saying okay. That's a no-no.
Okay, yeah. Well, it's lots of beneficial information, at least for me, and I'm sure that there are hundreds, maybe thousands of people from within our community who are watching this program, learning a lot tonight. I would like to, what do you say to our community members in order to be careful?
Well, in order to be careful, you have to look at the material. You look at your pipes. You look at the things that are potential that we talked about today. And this is a very scrubbed down, light
Sure.
type of a conversation. If they're all in good repair, you generally don't have much to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in doubt, though, call an inspector. There are asbestos inspectors out there. You can find them on. I'll say the K-Tech. But I kind of have to say that.
Yes. But you can also call the city or the village that you live
No.
in. The city, no? They don't
No.
care?
They
There
don't
is an
do.
inspector there.
They
maybe,
have an inspector, but they're not going to do your asbestos
if it's not
inspection.
immediate hazard to your health, or,
Right.
so they don't
If the
care.
building's falling down, they'll say you can't live here. But
Uh-huh.
call an inspector, and they'll look at it. They may sample it. I mean, we can never say it's not without actually having a laboratory tell us it's not. But we can tell you if it probably is.
Sure.
So you're going to treat it like it is. Don't work on things that don't go and fix a leaky pipe if it has insulation on it that you know isn't fiberglass.
Right.
If it looks like cardboard, or if it looks more like baby powder with cloth wrapping around it, call an inspector. Call an abatement company.
Sure. I really like to thank you very much
Well, it
for
was a
being
pleasure
with
being
us,
here.
and hopefully we will see you again and again, and we'll invite the big boss,
Well, we need to
Mr.
get him
Nick
out here.
Kobrosi, to come here and to engage him with positive conversation about what he have been doing for a long period of time. I thank you again, and hopefully we'll see you some other time. أعزائي المشاهدين، شكرا لإصغائكم ومتابعتكم، وحتى ألتقي معكم في الأسبوع القادم في حلقة جديدة من برنامج ضيف وقضية. لكم مني ومن أسرة البرنامج أجمل تحية، والسلام عليكم.